Our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Philip in Jupiter, Florida.
I was about to say, with all the rings around Saturn and Uranus, you landed on Jupiter?
He specified here, Florida, not the large gaseous planet. I'm curious what Jim thought of the Rockers. When did he first hear of a knockoff called the Midnight Rockers? I know gimmick plagiarism happened all the time back then, but this seems pretty egregious. Despite their obvious merit as a team, and Sean's legacy as one of the greatest of all time, what was Jim's impression at the time of the Rockers? Also, what was the impression that they made on the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express?
Well, the Rock and Roll didn't like it one little bit, obviously, because it's their fucking gimmick and almost their name. And I got kind of a kick out of it, a tickle, I should say, because they had to, the Midnight and the Rock and Roll was drawing so much money, they had to figure out a way to incorporate both of our names into one team and then rip off Ricky and Robert's gimmick. And I'm not knocking Sean or Marty, either one, for doing that, because they weren't, they were basically, they said, here's what you're going to do to have a fucking job. I think that actually, honestly, is the most open that the WWF ever was about admitting that they were ripping off the competition. Because with Demolition, at least the name was nothing like the Road Warriors. And, even though it was kind of the same thing visual, but they went all out. Not only the Rock and Roll Express's clothes, but both teams' names in the name, Midnight Rockers.
By the way, the bigger ripoff to the Road Warriors, I always thought, was when the Powers of Pain came in as baby faces in '88.
Well, yes, and that was pretty egregious also. But the Midnight Rockers, they were with Vern first, and we saw them on ESPN, and then when they went to Vince, they took Midnight Rockers out and just made them the Rockers. But it was, I didn't care because it was nothing like the Midnight Express. The Rock and Roll Express were not fucking happy. And then later on, with when they went to the it was actually, I got a kick out of it because they're admitting that they have to copy what we're doing because it was so hot. So I wasn't upset, but Ricky and Robert were highly displeased.
They had some great matches with Tully and Arn, with the Hart Foundation, with the Orient Express. I always like the Power and Glory match, but that's more of a squash than anything else. Did you watch any of their matches? Did you ever pay attention, especially when Tully and Arn were there, to the tag team matches?
Yeah. Because they were good. Michaels and Jannetty were a good team. Athletically, they were better than Ricky and Robert. The difference in why they never achieved anywhere near the success of the Rock and Roll Express came down to not, what they were capable of doing in the ring, but just the fact that it wasn't Ricky and Robert. They were the second team that came along. It was an obvious ripoff. Almost everybody, even most of the WWF fans, because it was so hot in '86, had seen the Rock and Roll. So they were viewed as a ripoff kind of thing. They weren't pushed to the moon like Ricky and Robert were, because even then the WWF was not featuring tag team matches in their main events on the house shows and on pay-per-view or whatever the fuck. So they weren't pushed like Ricky and Robert. And also they weren't neither one of them. Shawn Michaels could sell, but nobody could sell like Ricky Morton. And, Marty Jannetty could make a great comeback, but it wasn't Robert Gibson. It just wasn't them. It wasn't the first. And they didn't have matches. They didn't have opponents that Rock and Roll had. They didn't have matches the way the Rock and Roll had them. They didn't get sympathy the way the Rock and Roll did. It was just a copy team. They were great. They had great matches, but they didn't draw a fraction of the money or sell the tickets or gain a prominent place as did Ricky and Robert, which is why, Marty's still making up murders from 45 years ago. And, Michaels did okay for himself, but not as a tag team.
I think I saw somewhere his latest story is that he was jumped at Kennedy Airport recently.
What's a frequency, Kenneth?
I think he may need some serious
Well,
psychological...
yeah, here's the thing. He made up a story on social media about murdering a guy when he was a teenager and went with that until he said he was getting flagged on planes and brought in for questioning. And then he decided to tell the truth that he was really working an angle with a law enforcement professional that he knows that they would have a match where if he lost, he would go to jail. But then now recently he said, no, I just said that because I didn't want to get in trouble and be stopped on planes. But really what I did was I killed the guy and we buried we didn't throw it in the river, but I think he buried it somewhere. You know what Marty Jannetty needs? BetterHelp, folks. The friends that we have at BetterHelp can even help Marty Jannetty. Is something interfering with your happiness, preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating in under 48 hours. Professional counseling done securely online with a broad range of expertise that may not be locally available. Of course, in the pandemic, you don't want to go out and be locally available yourself anyway. This service is available worldwide. You can log into your account anytime, send a message to your counselor. You get timely responses. You can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed to find the right match. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Maybe this would help not only Marty Jannetty, but also folks like COVID Chris and all the people who are just miserable out there. Folks, visit BetterHelp.com/JCE. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/JCE. Get 10% off your first month's services. Join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. BetterHelp.
All right,
Help me.